What do you say, guys? We're at winter meetings, and you run into some crazy characters. I'm going to bring on one of the most well-known writers that ever covered the Cubs. He's actually with the Reds now. We're going to talk to Gordan Wittenmyer about his days covering the Cubs and a lot more. But first, let me remind you guys that we want you to be part of our channel. All you Wildcats, make sure that you like and subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and let's get this thing going. All right, there he is, Gordan Wittenmyer. I'm Mick Gillispie. First off, man, how you been?
I've been great. How have you been? It's been a while.
I know.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Winter meetings. I mean, how many is this for you?
I was thinking about that the other day. Sully, Paul Sullivan.
Oh yeah,
ran into him. I hadn't seen him in a little while, and he comes to these periodically now. It used to be he and I'd be at them every year together. It's got to be 25 years, maybe.
Wow.
Maybe, something like that.
You know, you're old, and I'm old with you because we've been here so many times.
Dude, there's people that have been born since the first time we covered these things that are now covering.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
My first ever job in baseball came here for the job seminar. I'm like one of the guys with the suits, and of course I didn't get one. but you know what? I made a connection or two, and then come back now, and I'm like a grizzled old vet, I'm walking in.
You're GV.
Yeah. Look at it. Multi meetings there, but you get it. So how do you like Cincinnati?
It's great. It's I don't know how close you got to that team or saw some of those players that came on in 2023. But that's one of the more exciting groups of young players probably in the game, definitely in the National League, for sure in the National League Central. And we just talked about being old, but walking into that clubhouse with 4 huge guys that debuted during the season in the lineup and another 3, 4, 5 on the pitching staff that debuted last year, all these young guys, and they all just love being together, playing hard and coming to the ballpark, and that youth made me feel younger.
Really? Yeah. Kind of got on the run last year. The Reds got on the run, and then
they got on right when I got there.
Yeah,
I got there September.
Well, let me start. Hold on. Let me just do this. Tell everyone how you got there, because we knew you from the Sun Times. You were at the Sun Times forever. And then you went to
13 years.
Yeah, NBC Chicago.
Right. And then they expanded their Cubs coverage. Right. I came in. I was part of a team. I was kind of the lead writer on a team, and did a lot of columns.
Right.
And plus the multimedia stuff. And then by the time my contract was up after 3 years, they were making significant cuts, like we've seen all over the country, right? Yeah. With the RSNs and the cable stuff and the cord cutting and everything. They basically they didn't bring me back on a contract, and then shortly after I left, the rest of the department was gone. So they're aggregating now instead of original content. Right. Just kind of. Yeah, so it was sad. I mean, it
sucked, right?
It sucked.
Did you feel like you made a mistake? Like you should have just stayed at the Sun Times?
Well, at first I wondered, and then and then I kind of did, because the one thing that was always said about the Sun Times, when I was there, was as long as there's a Sun Times, there's going to be a Cubs beat writer. There's going to be a Bears writer, and there's going to be a Cubs writer, and so just the facts. I mean, it was a better offer, a better deal, multimedia, to go to certainly the job security. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's just crazy to say, because newspapers are dying left and right, but I would have had job security if I'd stayed in the newspaper. That's funny.
Yeah. It's and they also got you too. Like they got your personality, like the way that you write, the things that you write about, that doesn't always happen. I mean,
well, I'm not sure everybody knows what you're talking about when you say that.
Well, you can, sometimes you're known to, You're going to come in hard if you feel like that's
ruffled a few feathers.
Yeah, you have ruffled a few feathers,
but not because that's my intent. It's because they don't want to. They don't. I try to tell the truth,
right?
And you and I identify on that. We talk about that a lot. And there's some that aren't like this. There's a lot of people in sports that aren't like this.
I know.
There's some organizations that aren't like this.
Yeah.
But there's some that don't like that at all.
No.
And turned out, there's a pretty hefty segment of the Chicago Cubs that doesn't like that. And it starts with ownership, honestly.
Well, I mean, it feels like sometimes with Marquee, like maybe they could be a little fair with the coverage because it's so positive, and unfortunately, life isn't always positive.
Okay, great example, right? They start their own damn network, and which, by the way, they start their own damn network because their rights deal ran out with NBC Sports Chicago,
right.
And that was the crossroads that made them want to ramp up their coverage, and that's where I got hired. That was the opening for me to get hired. So for whatever that's worth, but Marquee starts up its own network, and you're a longer pro in that side of the business certainly than I am. You know a lot more about it than I do.
Right.
I think we're on the same page on our perceptions of it. But man, they blow that team every chance they get on the air, and with the way they cover the team, even just the subject matter they cover. That team, in the time that their network existed, that team tanked for the second time in a decade.
Right.
The largest revenue team in baseball history to ever do it once. They did it twice in a decade. They sold off a whole bunch of the most popular players.
Right.
As part of that process. And then last year, for instance, they fought back in the race. They had a lead for a playoff spot late and completely tailspun into the end of the season. They looked like crap against the Arizona Diamondbacks, who wound up making the playoffs and going all the way to the World Series.
I know.
Manager loses his job, and I don't know if I heard one down the middle of the road word from them, never mind a negative word. There was a lot of stuff that the fans were pissed off about.
Yeah, I know. They were on this channel, on the Cubs baseball channel, constantly.
And that's
upset.
who your audience
That's
is.
right.
That's who your customer is.
That's right.
And if you're not honest with them, if they're pissed and you're acting happy about everything that's going on, why the hell should they believe you?
Yeah.
Why the hell should they watch you? It's a bad broadcast by definition if that's what they're doing, and that's what they've done from the start. They set out to do it. They don't want to piss anybody off. They want to. It's a happy Stepford Wives type of a sales pitch that they're making to fans. Evidently trying to grow. You don't have to grow the product. Chicago as Chicago sports culture includes some pretty savvy fans.
Right.
There are also some fans that have endured a lot over the years.
Oh yeah.
In almost every sport,
Great fans.
Except for maybe the 80s Bears and the 90s Bulls.
Right.
And when the
Hawks.
Cubs finally pushed through and the Hawks more recently. But before some of those, there were some droughts, there were some ugly there were some efforts to spend money short term and just colossally fail, and disappointment and heartache for the fan base. But they're still there. They're loyal. They care. They come back. They love their teams. The least you can do, if that's your audience and that's your customer base, is be honest with them. Be in it with them. You don't pretend like you're watching a different game. And that's the mistake that Marquee has made since. And for that, you talk about ruffling feathers. I used to have a column that I put together, kind of a little snarky column. Hey, here's what's going on this week. And
when you were with the Sun Times?
No, this was when I was NBC,
okay.
And I had an item in my column every week that was the douche of the week. And Marquee was a multiple winner of douche of the week. Yeah, it was like 3 times. I think they wound up clinching douche of the year by September 1st or something.
Do you get it? What do you? I probably don't even know.
Yeah, you don't want to know what the prize is.
It goes back to me to this. I grew up watching Cubs baseball. I think a lot of people that are on our channel and are the same way. It was Harry Carey and Steve Stone. Skip school, Harry Carey and Steve Stone. Like weekends, if they were on, Harry Carey and Steve Stone. I loved Harry Carey. And I loved the Cubs, and it was like a movie set to me. And the one thing that I always liked about Harry is I felt like he was shooting you straight. And I remember this story.
He cared.
Right.
He sounded like a fan who also knew what was going on.
Well, he did. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the Cubs brand wouldn't be half of what it is if it wasn't for Harry Carey.
No question.
Just going to tell you that. Yeah. And I'm saying maybe even more than half. But Bob Brandley, BB, who was manager of the Diamondbacks, won the World Series 2001. I think he's the most interesting person I've ever met in baseball. He's got a story about everything.
I like him a lot.
They're awesome. He was he got his first broadcasting job with the Cubs. And he said that this is the story he told me. He's like, I go on and Harry's on there and he's like, hey, what do you think about the Cubs this year? And he said, he's like, oh, they're going to win. And, this team has a chance to make the playoffs. And then they go to break. And Harry's like, do you really think that? Because it was not going to be a good team. And he's like, no, I was just saying that. And then Harry was like, don't do that. You got to tell people what you really think. And what happens is you can be fair. You can be nice about the way that you say it, but it's not entertaining for an audience for somebody to bullshit them. They want the truth. And that's and you're kind of good at that. Sometimes maybe, some people might feel like maybe a little too honest sometimes. Do you ever look back and go, man, I wish I would have kind of worded that a little different?
No, because, well, all right, maybe here and there the way I phrase something, but on as far as the substance.
But you
goes,
have respect.
No.
You're one of the most respected writers I've ever met by the players. You go to the players.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope that's true. And what I was going to say is, and that actually fits what I was going to say. What you're describing about me, or if somebody doesn't like me, if I'm calling them a douche or whatever, and I didn't.
Well, you can call me a douche, and I love it. I think it's funny.
I didn't call. I mean, there were.
It wasn't personal.
It was the network. It was how they approached.
Right.
It was how they treated the fans, like treating the fans like they're idiots. That's why I called them the douche of the week. But my point is, like, you can be hard and hold people accountable and be truthful without disrespecting them.
Right.
I respect the last guy on a roster. You know how hard it is to get the big leagues? I can only imagine, because I never came close.
Right.
Right. And so I watched these guys. I've watched it for years and years and years, what it takes to get there and what it takes to get close and not get there.
Oh man. I know.
These guys, and people want to say, well, that player's trash, or that player is this. That player said, that player doesn't suck.
Yeah, right.
That player is one of the best in the world at what they do. Way better than what you and I are at what we do.
Yeah.
And but at that level, the differences, show, right? I mean, the smallest differences make the huge difference in the numbers and whether you get paid and whether you stick or not and all that. So, yeah, in context, sure, you say whatever you want. But really, if you approach it if you start from the position of that level of respect and then at least you have a chance,
right?
At least you have a chance, and then your next step is just to be fair. And so if I'm writing anything about anybody, I'm going to go to you and I'm going to say, hey, this is what it looks like, or this is what somebody else said, or just you tell me what's going on.
Right. How tough is it when you write a story, maybe you're critical of a team president or the owner or one of the players or a manager or something, and then you got to go see them. You run into them. Do you ever worry about that?
No, I mean, well, I've done this.
Is it in the back of your mind, though? I just wrote that story.
Early in my career, when you haven't done it before, or when you haven't had many of those moments, then you're writing and you're saying, this is what I have. This is what I need to write.
Right.
Boy, they're not going to like that. But I did talk to them, and then you're like, you're bracing yourself going in the next day. Most of the guys get it. It's definitely the managers, coaches, ones that have been around the game for a long time. And and a lot of times when you're hard on the organization, it's not necessarily hard on that third base coach who sent the runner or that manager, or oftentimes even that player. Sometimes it's they don't have enough. This roster doesn't have enough. Or and I think, by the way, I this is kind of an aside to all that. I think umpires are low hanging fruit, and if you rip umpires, I think that's just it's just lazy. If you rip managers, it better be really effing specific,
right?
And it better be something that is germane to the season, not just pick them apart for a decision in a game that everybody says, hey, that cost me a game. It better be something that stands out as a bigger picture thing that says something about the guy's abilities, because again, it's so easy. It's low hanging fruit.
Right.
And it starts crossing that line of what's fair and what's not.
Right.
And so
is this these are good points. I didn't know that, but I didn't know that that's kind of the way that you guys view things.
It's the way that I view it.
Yeah, but I think it makes a lot of sense because what we know, covering a team every day, sometimes there's a decision that doesn't make sense at the time, and then when you talk to them, there's a reason why. That makes very good sense. Like if you send a runner,
right,
or you don't, well, look, man, the next guy's, whatever, he's not going to get a hit. The pitchers do, back in the day, the pitchers do up next. I don't know. Like that guy's arm is bad. I noticed that. We just felt like this was our best chance to score, whatever it could be. Right.
I'll give you an example. Right. One of my buddies back in Chicago, Dave Kaplan, Dave.
Oh, Cap. Yeah.
Cap.
What's your podcast with him called?
It's called the Recap Cubs Podcast.
Okay, cool.
REKAP.
Oh, nice. Right. Love him.
Yeah. We have fun with that. But I was going on his radio show back in the day, and Joe Madden, we were out on the West Coast, or I can't remember what the deal was, wherever the hell we were. Steve Cishek was on the team.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
And he was left in a game to walk three guys late in the game, and it wound up costing him the game. And with each successive pitch almost, but certainly after the first walk or two, you're like, oh man, he doesn't have it. But he didn't go get him just yet. And at the time, when you're around the team every day, you kind of get a sense of the patterns and the rhythms and stuff. I'm saying to myself, well, geez, who the hell's he going to go get? I would take my chances that this guy figures it out within a batter, or this guy finds something within a batter because of who he is and how long he's been around, than to go get that guy that's got 30 appearances ever in the big leagues, or this other guy that's not the greatest matchup or whatever. So I'm already kind of in my mind playing out. There's got to be a reason that he's not doing this. And then you come to find out that maybe guys who you thought were available aren't.
Right.
And plus they didn't have the depth out there. So the next morning I'm going to be on a Cap show, and I hear before I come on the air, I'm listening, and they're just ripping the crap out of man, and they're saying all kinds of things. And before I went on the air, I just said to Cap, I just said, hey, listen, there's some reasons behind this. I don't want to go down that road with you. And so, we didn't, but he didn't know all the reasons.
Yeah, right.
And the fans didn't know all the reasons. And so that's an example of what you're talking about. I'll give you another example of where I actually did criticize a manager for something. It was David Ross in his first year, which is doubly not fair.
Right.
And his first year was the pandemic season.
Yeah.
Which was 10 times not fair.
I know. Yeah.
And I knew Rossi from when he was a player. So at least I knew him. At least I wasn't a stranger to him, but that we didn't have face-to-face access that year. So you couldn't go in the clubhouse or the manager's office.
Right.
So everything was Zoom. So they were in a playoff race. This was September. The Twins were in town, and Kyle Schwarber was in left field. And it was a close game. The Twins had they had a guy on base. They got a guy on first base. I think he was on first base. Anyway, point is, the ball got hit to Schwarber, and Schwarber didn't handle it perfectly. Schwarber's not an outfielder.
He's not. Yeah,
and he's only playing out there because you didn't have any choice.
Yeah, right.
So no, I don't blame anybody for that. Right. I don't blame anybody that he's out there. and Schwarber comes up with the ball and gets surprised that the runner's taken an extra base on it and winds up throwing it in a split second too late. But he did. As soon as he saw what was going on, he was on it, through where it needed to go, and eventually the run scored and they lost the game. Ross took him out of the game. And to me, so I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So on the Zooms, we asked Ross, and he had very little answer. Schwarber had a little more of an answer, but not much. And it was clear that there was probably some disagreement, but Schwarber. I mean, he was being the good soldier. He wasn't going to put anybody.
He's a great person.
Great person. He took it. He took it and wore it. But there had been a previous game, and remember, this was only a 2-month season, so it wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
Where Javi Baez had popped a ball up and
didn't
not run it out.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And he got thrown out because he didn't run it out. The ball got dropped. He didn't bench him. And in fact, he had an excuse for him. And my take on it, and I couldn't be sure, I tried to ask the questions on the Zoom. My take on it was that he wanted to make a statement. He's a manager who doesn't have a lot of experience doing this. He knows how things play in a clubhouse. He's been on big league clubs for a long time. He knows what leadership looks like. If he benches Javi, he might lose Javi for a week, 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He's going to piss off Javi. He might not get the most out of Javi.
Right.
And it's only a short season anyway, so you can't really afford to do that. By the time this Twins game happened, everybody was separated for the playoff race by a game or two.
Yeah,
like
right.
All these games mattered down the stretch, whatever. And I think he saw an opportunity to take a guy who would wear it. The one guy on the team that wouldn't say a crossword.
Yeah, right.
The one guy on the team that would just do whatever was necessary, and he could probably even talk to him in an office later. And
right.
So I wrote it, and I said it was a bad move, it was bad look. It was wrong to do to Schwarber. You showed him up, and he made you look good.
Yeah.
And these other guys are big league ball players. Most of them are veterans. You're not fooling them.
Right.
They know exactly what you're doing. Who is it that you're trying to shake up?
Yeah.
So this was my take. I used as many of the quotes as I could. I didn't go too deep on my opinion other than to say this is what it looked like. And that was 2020. That was just a few years ago. And even with all my experience, it wasn't that I was, I wasn't fearful of somebody's opinion.
Right.
But I didn't want to be wrong, and I didn't want to be unfair. And I remember talking to the media relations guy at the time and saying, "Hey, did you happen to read that?" And I said, he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, am I off base on that?" And because I was the only one that wrote that.
Yeah, right,
take.
right.
And a few of us in the press box saw and thought the same thing, but I was the only one who wrote it. And he said, "Let me put it this way. I think if Rossi had it to do over again, he would have taken that one back."
There you go.
So at least it validated. I don't know if I phrased it exactly right.
Right.
But the take wasn't wrong. And it validated that, I saw what I thought I saw.
Yeah.
And they saw the same thing.
Have you ever written a story and the player call you out?
Yeah.
And how does that? Give me some examples.
That's how I get my douche of the week.
If they call you out, they come in, because I know I've been in the clubhouse before when I see him messing with you and stuff. Back in the day,
and some of them like Rizzo would give me crap for being negative all the time. They won the World Series. Can't be negative anymore, can you? I said, "Hey, it's a new year next year, man." So we have fun, but there's guys that have done it, yeah, and when you show up the next day, that's a big part of working within that, I guess.
Yeah, right.
They're going to get mad, but if you don't make it personal, if it's about the baseball,
yeah,
then it's they can get mad. And then, well, I give you an example. I mean, this is, and you know what? And a lot of times when a guy doesn't, when you are being just fair and professional and they don't like what it is you say. I mean, if you go back and read story after story, I don't think you're going to find stories where I took this player to task or I ripped that guy or I ripped the pitch. You know what, like, if the starting pitching isn't going well, I'll point that out. I'm not going to bury an individual guy. They're all trying to win and trying to perform. You know, if I'm, I'll analyze what it might lead to. If the bullpen's carrying them, that bullpen ain't going to hold up forever. You know, that kind of stuff. But sometimes, you'll get a player, and it's usually the ones that don't understand what your job is or think you should be a fan or something. And Marlon Byrd was a guy.
I remember those days.
And I don't think Marlon liked how I covered things. And to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of Marlon's most of the time. Yeah. As an individual, I didn't, and that's off limits as far as writing about it and stuff.
Right.
So you remember the Lou Piniella days?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, they had Zambrano on that team. You never knew what was going to go.
I know.
And every time they played the White Sox,
I would have been more. Honestly, I would have been a little concerned if I had written something that was a little too negative towards Big Z. He always had that look in his face, like a dog that might attack you for no reason. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you never knew.
You were too comfortable around him. But I think that's what also made him who he was on the mound. And remember, he could hit too.
No doubt. Oh man, he could hit. In the offseason, there were times he'd be a DH in winter ball.
Yeah.
But they were on the south side, and in fact, I think it involved Zambrano. I think it was the game. I could be getting my years conflated.
Right, that's all right.
But I think it was the game where Zambrano confronted Derek Lee, or Derek Lee said something to Zambrano in the dugout after a play, because Zambrano was getting a little too animated.
Yeah.
He would get too amped up sometimes. And D. Lee said something to him, and Zambrano took offense and got angry at him, and they had to be separated. Yeah. And I think somebody gets sent home. I can't remember how it all went. But the point is this: it was another. Can I say shit show?
Yeah, shit show. Say it.
It was another shit show on the South Side involving the Cubs. Every time they played the White Sox, whether it was AJ Przinsky getting punched or what, man. I mean, there was something that happened.
This is. I got one. I'm doing spring training. First, we got a wireless mic, and we're gonna go in the dugout, and we're gonna talk to Pat Listash, right? And during the game, it's a spring training game, and I go down. I'm sitting a couple rows back, ready to go ready to go down. I see Pat. He's like,
yeah.
I'm like.
Pat's one of my favorites.
Loved him, right?
Yeah.
What happened was there was a fight in the dugout. Do you remember that? It was the pitcher that they got from the Mariners.
Oh, it was Carlos Silva and Rami.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that happened with me 2 rows back, ready to go in ready to go in there. It's before we had all the stuff. It's before Marquee and all. You didn't have these games where if we didn't put them on the internet, you didn't hear them.
Right.
And it was going to be like such a great feature. Hey, Len's going to send it down to Mick. Hey, and then there's a fight in the dugout. This is crazy. Yeah. So we never tried it again. That was it. Like we never tried it again.
Remind me to circle back on that, because I got an anecdote from before that, from before the game on that. But anyway, the thing about Marlon Byrd. So there was another shit show with the White Sox, and one of the, I talked to players. It was quiet clubhouse afterwards. I talked to players about how crazy stuff was like, and I talked to a couple players that had recently joined the team, and I think one guy that's was a longtime veteran, and I've been around here for 4 years at that point. You know, I said, like, have you been on a team like this before? You ever seen this kind of stuff happen before? He says, not at any point in my career. And, you know, somebody else did something similar, and somebody else, and, you know, and even the guys, the team leaders that have been around for a while, kind of diplomatically said things, but you could tell, like, here we go again. So all I did, I just described it, a couple of quotes, and I mentioned that, you know, this team looks more like a traveling circus than a big league contender or something like that. And in my mind, it's not even original.
Yeah, right.
Never mind, it's not that harsh.
Yeah.
So there might have been a day off, and then the next day they're at Wrigley, and I walk in the clubhouse, and I hear my name from across the way, and it's Marlon. Yeah, what's up? And he's pissed. He said, I saw your story. I said, which one? Now, at this point, I had written yet another story that I thought was way harsher.
Right.
Like, where are these guys going to go? What
Right.
the hell's next?
You were starting to really dig your teeth into this team.
Well, but all I was writing what was going on.
Right,
it was
right,
the
right,
weirdest
right.
crap I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
So I genuinely don't know which story he's talking about, because
Right.
it'd been an off day. I'd written another story.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? I saw what you wrote, and what you said about us.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I didn't say
What you said about
what the hell? I've said stuff about this team, but nothing recently. Like, what could he possibly be talking about? He said, "Did you call us a circus?" I said, "Oh yeah." And he said, "You think we're a traveling circus?" I said, "Yeah, don't you?" And at this point, he's trying to raise his voice and, like, make himself.
I remember seeing this kind of stuff with him.
And this was in that little tiny clubhouse, the old clubhouse at Wrigley Field. And I'm like, really, dude? You're gonna get mad at this? I guarantee it. That guy doesn't care. That guy doesn't care. And
Say that?
no, I didn't. I
Okay.
said, and he kept coming at me with the same type of question, and I kept coming back. Yes, I do think that. And why don't you think that? And you think this is normal? And then he says, try doing your stories without any quotes. And he says, I'm not. And he storms off, and he says, oh, don't give this guy any quotes. Don't give this guy any quotes. And the other guys are like, they're turning their heads, and they're like rolling their eyes. And I find out that he wasn't the most popular guy.
Yeah, right.
And he was nothing. I didn't want to. I don't know.
They liked it.
They.
In a way,
they knew what was going on.
Yeah, right.
They don't expect you to lie for them.
Yeah. Did they keep giving you quotes?
Yeah, but the other thing is,
have you ever been boycotted?
Yeah, by a guy I'm pretty tight with now, actually, LaTroy Hawkins. But what was funny is I could do my job all day long with no quotes. And you may like that even less.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of a silly premise to begin with, but that was Marlon. That's who he was. But
circle back.
Well, you want LaTroy Hawkins?
Well, tell me that one, yeah, and then circle back to the fight in the.
Yeah, it was back when I covered the Twins, and we did the Twins Fest thing, and the luncheon. I was seated at the same table with a handful of players, including LaTroy. And LaTroy's from Gary, Indiana. And at the time I was living in Minnesota and driving to Cleveland where my son lived with my ex-wife. So I would spend the off seasons getting over there as much as I could, and I'd drive. And so, about halfway point would be back Gary. So I said something to him about, I said, I thought of you a lot this off season. He said, oh, why is that? I said, because I drove to Cleveland a lot. So I'd drive through Gary. And, he said, oh, yeah, what'd you think? I said, yeah, I kept thinking, why would anybody choose to live there? I thought I was making a harmless enough joke.
Yeah.
He got pissed. And he says, where are you from? And I said, well, Seattle originally. He says, why haven't you killed yourself yet? And, the thing was,
oh man.
The thing I knew about LaTroy like, 'cause he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Like he's actually genuinely really a good guy.
Yeah.
But he told me at that point he wasn't going to talk to me all season, and spring training hadn't even started. And you know what? He didn't talk to me all season.
So when did you guys patch it up?
Toward the end of that year, and then into the next year, and you know, like I said, I always knew he was a good guy. I never held that against him. I mean, he had to, you know, represent his do what he had to do.
Yeah,
that's
just
fine.
Set you straight.
You know, but I didn't take that the same way as I would have something from somebody else. And besides, you know, maybe it was a cheap shot. I mean, we were just sitting around talking. It wasn't like I was saying anything publicly. Well, at least till now.
Yeah.
But
so the fight in the dugout. Yeah.
You want me to circle back to that?
Yeah, go to that, and then I'm going to ask you some Cubs questions.
When I first got the Cubs beat, I had come from Minnesota. And
what year was that?
07 was my first year.
Oh, it's my first year with the Cubs too.
Lou Pinello's first year.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I had Lou in Seattle. So
the only one left.
Yeah, right.
Don't check.
My God.
07.
So I was
jump off this balcony right now. Where'd my life go?
My practice and methods in spring training was like I would about a week before spring training, I'd start coming up with ideas, spring training ideas, and I would write out and print out like all my story ideas, like whole paragraph descriptions of the story, who I would talk to, and then I would even slot in like what days I would run them, you know, if nothing happened.
Yeah, right. If just to have some ideas.
So I'd always have ideas, and I'd always have a backup plan, and so I'd always be working on something. First week of spring training, I'm pulling out my papers, I'm looking at it. And so this is 07. Paul Sullivan, what's that? Oh, these are my story ideas. This is my story budget. He says, 4. What about that? That's because I'm going to need some spring training. It's 45 days is nothing. I'm going to need some story ideas and work on some features. He said, you don't need that covering the Cubs. Something always happens with the Cubs.
Yeah.
Every day something happens with the Cubs. You don't need to plan anything. Stuff will just happen. I said, that's not, very funny, whatever. No, I'm going to plan my stuff. I don't know if I used 2 or 3 of those story ideas all spring. Because stuff happened, like starting day 1 with Kerry Wood's hot tub accident that kept him from pitching. So that's 07. 08 was the same thing. I lose there. The team's relevant. Stuff's going on. Guys are signing. Guys are doing this and that. So he's right. Sully's right.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So what year was that? So that was 2010, right?
Yeah.
So now I've been 3 years there. It's my 4th spring training. I pull into the lot in Maryvale where they're going to play the Brewers. That was that game.
Yeah.
And so we've gone through the first 2 weeks of February, and now a game or 2 has been played in the spring, and it's been the sleepiest spring since I've been covering the Cubs. And I happened to pull in just as Sully pulled in, and I got out. I said, "You son of a bitch! You told me that I never had to plan for stories on this beat, and so I got no planning coming into this spring, and nothing's going on." And he just kind of calmly looked at me and he said, "Don't just wait. Don't worry."
Yeah, I can see him saying that too.
That was the day of the fight.
Day of the fight.
Sully's always right. That's one thing I learned all those years covering the beat. If Sully says something, he's right.
He's just on it. He's been doing it for a long time too. Who's your favorite Cubs?
I love Sorry. I mean, since I'm thinking of that team in particular, Sorry's a great dude. I mean, everybody loves Ryan Dempster, right? Yeah. D. Lee. I mean, pro's pro. What a good dude. What's that?
Ryan.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
He's come on our podcast a bunch of times. He was one of my guys, man. Great dude. Oh, gosh. A lot of that core, I like those guys. Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, Willie.
I love the emotion that guy brings to the game.
Me too.
How much he cares. And if you take that for granted or sort of piss on it, kind of like the Cubs did there, and like he doesn't do this well enough, he doesn't frame well, and instead of leaning into what he does bring, you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think that's the mistake that the Cardinals made early on with him last year.
Did he end up how did his year finish there? Did he end up
much better? He was on a much better footing with them, and I think they respected him a lot. They realized, Cardinals go and they had Yachty all those years, and even in the end, when Yachty's not hitting and Yachty's breaking down, Yachty was a magician with that pitching staff.
Oh yeah,
and because he was there all those years, you also didn't have anybody crossing, so he was like having another starting pitcher on your staff.
Yeah.
That's what he did for the depth and the quality of your group.
Right.
So they said all off season long, we're not going to be able to replace that. We know we can't replace that.
Right.
So they go out and they get Wilson. Wilson's Wilson. He's not Yachty light. He's not anything else. What they didn't do is go fix that pitching staff, because it wasn't good enough to win.
Right. They're doing that now.
And we saw that then.
Yeah.
So what happened early on
pitchers.
When they start losing and their pitchers start bitching and moaning because they're pointing fingers and they don't have Yachty anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have this. Who's this guy? I don't agree with what he wants to do. And, whether it's Jack Flaherty or whoever,
yeah, they
start hammering on Contreras. But then the organization threw him under the bus. And that's unconscionable.
Yeah, right.
And that was just dumb. And by the way, Mozeliak said just this week to his writers, I was probably wrong for that one.
Really?
We probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. How about that? What'd you think of the move to fire David Ross and hire Craig Counsell? No one saw it coming.
Yeah.
Give me your take on that, business wise, and then personal. You know both guys. You've covered, obviously both guys.
Well, I'll start from
in the front office. I mean, just give me your overall take of the whole situation.
Well, what's the first thing all of us thought of? Joe Madden, Rick Renneria.
That's right.
Right. In the case of Joe Madden, Rick Renneria, you had one of the preeminent managers in the game at the time who was doing crazy good things with Tampa Bay, where nobody had done that before, and getting the most out of those younger, lesser paid players, and working in sync with the front office in a holistic organizational plan, making it work in a very creative way on the ground. That people have used this term, Joe's superpower is with the young kids, making them believe that they belong to big leagues maybe earlier than they have a right to.
No doubt.
And so
making them feel comfortable.
Yeah. So
getting them ready.
It was a no-brainer at the time. Here's a guy that took Tampa Bay to the World Series, a place the Cubs hadn't been since before integration in the game. Wow. And so
wow. I never even thought about that.
Right? 1945. And so
great point.
And that's how long it'd been. So and then he's available all of a sudden. And the guy who was, and I love Ricky Renneria, but he was a stopgap because your handpicked guy, Dale Swaim, hadn't worked out. You needed to make a change, and you weren't ready to win yet. You got sort of a player development at the big league
right
guy. And so the timing was right.
Yeah.
It sucked. It was the wrong thing to do to Rick Renneria. They mistreated him, kicked him to the curb. But for your organization and where it was going, it was the right thing to go.
You guys, I don't remember exactly who it was, but you guys told me when he was the manager, Rick Renteria, that he didn't manage things. With you guys,
unlike his next stop on the South Side, over his head might be too strong of a term. Again,
but that's how you guys felt. That was like back then, but obviously you know what I mean.
Here's why. It boiled down to this. It was his first job. It took him a long time as a baseball lifer to get that opportunity. It was his first managing job. And he was coming into a big marketplace with a star level executive running the baseball ops, Theo. I believe he was looking over his shoulder all the time, to the point that it affected just talking about normal things to the media and worrying about what he was saying.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that's fair.
And his first press conference was just a shit show.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember you guys saying that. So then you get, and I thought that was a brilliant move. And
it was the right move at the right time.
Move at the right time.
And they also ramped up right at that time, and they brought in the.
But I also thought when David Ross took over, it was the right move for that team at that time.
And that's a fair point.
That's a fair point.
I thought Joe probably got scapegoated. I thought 2 seasons of some of his best managing was in 18 and 19 when he was on the hot seat, and not because he was on the hot seat, but because of some financial payroll situations. They were their roster quality had declined like substantially, like you could measurably. To the point where in 19 they really didn't even have a bullpen.
And they weren't. And the other thing is that they weren't developing players at that point.
They developed
the farm
no
system.
pitchers, none.
The farm system was run into the ground.
Yes, and
when Theo was there, and that to me is one of the things that has gotten so much better now.
Yes.
And it's not just, hey, we traded for these guys. It's just there's a lot of talent. Whether you traded for them, whether you drafted them, and there was no talent.
And we'll find out.
We will
ultimately, whether they got it right this time.
I think,
but it took several iterations to get to this point.
So then now,
so Joe paid the price for a lot of that.
Right.
At that, in my mind. Now, I also know there's some other things, and so they make that move. Your point, fair point. Now we get to this point. I think we all agree Craig Counsell is one of the best managers in the game.
Yep.
Now, he's never been to a World Series. He's had some teams that maybe should have got there. That 18 team was the hot team going in.
Right.
And they almost got there. That home field advantage, I think, when they played the Dodgers, I think. But at any rate, they missed. And I don't know how good or bad Rossi is, because we already talked about it. 2020 was his first season managing. This friggin' pandemic, and they got to the playoffs.
Yeah,
not only got to the playoffs, but they didn't pop a positive on the daily testing. They were the only team in baseball that didn't pop a positive. So something discipline wise was working in that group. Theo had a great plan for the pandemic and the testing, and it was executed very well by their manager and the other leadership around there. So something was working. The next year, they go in after non-tendering Kyle Schwarber over money, because of the ownership ran like, can I say pussies on here?
I don't care.
Chad,
do you care? He don't care. We don't care.
From the pandemic losses. These are billionaires, right? So they're making normal front office people and ball players and fans bear the brunt of a lot of these losses, instead of weathering a storm that was easiest, relatively speaking, for them to weather. So they ran from the pandemic losses, and part of that was non-tendering Kyle Schwarber and dumping Yu Darvish.
Right, which the Schwarber ones turned out to be
one of the all-time bad non-tenders, right up there with David Ortiz and some others.
Yeah,
Ortiz being probably the all-timer. Right. But so they gutted the roster, and they came back, and we knew that Rizzo and Baez and Bryant, all these guys were in play for trades at the deadline if they didn't get extensions done. They talked extensions with one or two of them before spring training, and that was it. Or before the season started. That was it. And so then we know they're gone. They're in first place on June 24th.
Yeah.
That team had no business sniffing first place. So now his first full season in the big leagues, or as a big league manager, when he's got his ace pitcher's been sold down the river, and his best pure power guy, a lefty slugger, is just cut loose. And he knows that all his other key pieces are going to be gone, and they're in first place on June 24th. That was pretty good managing.
Yeah.
It eventually caught up to him. They hit a losing streak, and then they all got traded, and then they hit another losing streak,
right,
and it ended badly. That's obviously not on him. The next year was the lockout and an abbreviated spring training, and you're in the rebuild mode now.
Yep.
That's not on him. 20, 21, 22. 23 was the first year that he had tools again to try to win, and a normal spring training,
right,
normal off season, normal season. And it didn't look good early. We found out that they didn't give him enough of a bullpen.
Right.
And it didn't get, they added one guy at the deadline.
Yeah.
A depth piece. And then they got back in the race. They never stopped playing for him.
Right.
And then it looked like they were going to win it. And then they collapsed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on him? I don't know.
Right.
My point is that for 3 years, you didn't have the ability to even evaluate it.
Right.
Even if you were an expert in evaluation of managers. Yeah.
So then the decision itself, the way that it all went down.
And then now you're looking at, I mean, they mistreated him. I mean, look, and the worst part about it was that this had to be in the backs of their mind. Everybody knew Counsell was going to be a free agent.
Right.
So if you go after him, what you can't do and what they couldn't do is go ask permission, because there's no way that the Brewers are going to give you permission to talk to him while he's under contract. So you had to wait until he was actually
and then they're going to leak it to the media, and it's going to.
But let's say you don't care about that. So what they're doing is they're playing both sides of the coin, right? Like, we love Rossi, which is what they said coming out of the season. He's our guy. We love him. We thought he did a great job. You're saying all this stuff. You're blowing him, and then he winds up going into the offseason thinking he's under contract and everything. And he's literally in meetings and working on next season. The whole time behind his back. And, some of that, that's business. That's big business. Fine, whatever. They've got this plan in place, and they got to wait till November 1st when Counsell officially becomes a free agent, so they can talk to him free and clear. And then it all comes together in a matter of just a couple of days.
Yeah.
Wow, they got him. Wow, we got him. Oh, shit. Now we got to go fire Rossi.
Yeah.
It's kind of back-ass words in a minimum. And plus, what a terrible way to treat your guy. And then your messaging publicly is, we love Rossi.
Mm-hmm.
But he'll always be a Cubs legend and a World Series hero. And we miss you, Rossi, on social media. We miss you. Thanks, Rossi. What a. I don't know. I don't have words for it, man.
This is, to me, though, this is what I thought. I just was like, and you're right. When it comes to not what he was as a manager, which this is only the first job he's ever had.
Right.
He might be the next Bruce Bochy. I mean, it could work into that.
Joe Torre didn't have success the first time around. Francona didn't have success the first time around.
You go through this, especially when you didn't spend any time
coaching.
But
I'm not even sure he didn't have success. I mean,
right, we don't know, right?
And let's just be perfectly clear here. You asked me what I thought of, like, how it went down.
Yeah.
To me, that's a human being question.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint, that's business.
Yeah.
If you get Shohei Ohtani instead of Matt Burvis, go get Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, right.
With all due respect to Matt Burvis.
Yeah, no disrespect to Matt.
So I get that. It's also harder to measure just what impact the manager has and all that. And by the way, if you do this, you go make him the highest paid manager, and again, damn well better go at it. If you're not getting Ohtani, you better go get Yamamoto. If you're not getting Yamamoto, you better go trade for Soto, and you're not going to get him because he just got traded to somebody else. Blake Snell, you better go get everything you need on that roster.
That's right. The pieces, and I feel like that's coming. I'm with you. You know what? On your analysis, I felt like that. This is, to me, I just felt like when the Cubs won, Theo was the best in the world at what he did, and I thought Joe Madden was the best in the world at what he did. Plus, he was the perfect fit. It just felt like over the course of time, when all of the guys that Rossi had played with, which was kind of his his value, right? They respected him. They knew him. He knew them.
It was both. It was a double-edged sword.
Oh, wow. No Soto deal yet.
Oh, is there a hang up on it?
So, anyway, just to finish this,
could be physical, could be last details. But
just to kind of wrap this whole thing up, the last topic, because we've talked an hour, and I know we got to get you back.
Been that long?
I know it's been great. It's been a lot of fun. It's that I just felt like this move. I just wasn't sure what we had with Rossi, but I feel like this move, you go out and you get the best, and that it's going to help you win in the long run. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the right answer is. I've thought about this.
But that's their job, right? Their job is to win.
Yeah, and that's why I let him off the hook. It's like, even though you're right, and I'm sure they would tell you that. If you ask Jed, and you're off the record, he'd probably be like, it's probably one of the worst things he's ever had to do.
Hey, I agree with your take.
But but at the same time,
I was answering what I thought was your question.
Oh, no, I'm agreeing. Like, we're kind of on the same page. I love the way that you work through it, though. And it's like, because I've.
Yeah,
it's a lot to work through.
You go back to 2016, the trade deadline, the Cubs were on their way to 103 wins, and they were in first place. Their lead had dipped a little bit, but they were in great shape.
Right.
They were going to go to the playoffs and be the top seed by all projections. And Aroldis Chapman was available, and they got in talks on Aroldis Chapman and Andrew Miller. So what happened as soon as those rumors came out? You have people getting on their soapboxes and saying, "Well, but what about the stuff, the domestic violence stuff? I think he get a suspension. He was shooting a gun or something."
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it involved physically assaulting anybody, but it sure is involved shooting a gun in his garage or something.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was a outburst of anger and whatever. And I'm not in any way whatsoever trying to downplay that.
Mm-hmm.
It's serious. I wouldn't want him anywhere near my loved ones. I'm not going to invite him over to dinner.
Right.
But here's the thing. When you're Theo Epstein in that moment, and I got asked this on one of the radio shows at that time.
Yeah.
Do you go get him? I said, if Theo Epstein has a chance to trade for what he's willing to give up and get Aroldis Chapman for this team for the rest of this year, and he doesn't do it because of some other reason that has nothing to do with baseball or the clubhouse, then he should be fired.
Yeah.
Because that's his job. Now, if his job is the team harmony or community harmony around your team, then maybe he should pass. His job's to win. And specifically at that time, they hadn't won a World Series in over 100 years. His job is to win the frigging World Series. That's his only job. And if making that move isn't going to disrupt that process,
right,
and there's no criminal liability, then you better do it.
Yeah.
And it was the right move to make. And that's kind of it's a different.
Right.
I
got you.
It's not apples to apples.
No, but I get it.
But it's one of those decisions where there's a human side to it.
Right.
And a right and wrong. There's a moral side to it. And there's just a hardcore, what's your effing job?
Yeah. Bottom line is you're there to win.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. And this is a short one. Now that you're in Cincinnati, have you picked Gold Star chili or have you picked, what's the other one? Skyline. Because that's when you go there.
That's a bullshit question, man.
Because they ask you that all the time. Or do you have any of it? Do you?
No, it's called zero. It's called staying away from both of those swill friggin' meals. That ain't fucking chili. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. At this point,
that ain't chili. And you know what? You know what the inside joke is? I'm convinced they don't think it is either.
Yeah, right.
They always brag about it. It's like Chicago and Chicago style pizza. Nobody in Chicago eats Chicago style pizza. The tourists do. They eat tavern pizza. which is actually good. That other shit, it's like compact lasagna or something.
Yeah, it is. It's very thick.
Yeah, and it's fine once in a while, but it's not pizza, for God's sake.
How can people follow you, Gordan?
At GWMLB, or it's Cincinnati.com these days. And don't forget the Cubs podcast with Dave Kaplan.
Yeah, I love Dave.
The Cubs recap podcast.
Yeah, he does a great job. Came on, and I got to have him on. And once the Ohtani thing hits, I'm going to try to get him to come back on and tell me what he thinks.
We just did a podcast today, and we've got. I told him, I said, here's my prediction. Like, I don't think they get Ohtani because I think
you guys definitely don't. I did a poll of all of you guys, and I don't think anyone's one person. I'm not going to say who it is. Gave the Cubs a 0.00001 chance of getting him.
Shahada?
I'm not.
I'm trying to think that he's the guy that's the former engineer in the
0.1. So we'll see.
Yeah, and that might be optimistic.
Yeah, right.
No, but
who knows?
But
man.
I did predict. I said within 10 days, you and I are going to be doing an emergency podcast because I think once that moves, whatever that is,
Cubs are going to drop something on us.
Cubs will drop something on us because I think at that point they've got multiple moves coming, and I think a big one will come quickly.
Well, Gordan, always great talking to you, brother.
You too, man. Great seeing you.
You too. Let me remind you guys that our channel is brought to you by Modern Lending. Chad Anderson and his crew have helped over 10,000 families. He does investment consulting. He's an Airbnb expert. Give him a call or check him out online at chadanderson.info. And also, this time of year, the Tennessee Smokies won their first championship in 45 years, and we got the swag to prove it. They want you to go to the team store, smokiesbaseball.teamstore. Whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, maybe a birthday's coming up, maybe you just want to gear up, check them both out. Go ahead.
Good luck to your Crimson Tide.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, because I want another shot at you guys.
Yeah, and the Washington, Alabama thing, I never thought about that.
Yeah, it'll be for the
championship.
championship.
I have, but not today. Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah,
that would be great. All right, Gordan, let me play this.